All right, good evening once again. This is the fourth monthly Blue Ridge Story Space, so we're so grateful to be here. We're glad that Oddfellows has allowed us to be here for free, so please eat, drink, and make merry and support Oddfellows. Up here, for those of you who don't know, this is the famous or perhaps infamous hat, and what we do is, if you would like to tell a story, a 5 to 7 minute story with a beginning, middle, and end about this month's theme, which is It Was a Dark and Stormy Night, then you can come up at any time. It doesn't have to be right now, although I must say we already have 5 names in the hat, which is awesome on such a dark and snowy night. Because I know a lot of people, I think we've had at least 6 or 7 people who were supposed to be with us tonight who chickened out because of the snow. And so I imagine that we'll probably have a smaller crowd tonight, although a few people might trickle on in a little bit later. But if you would like to tell a story, you can put your name in the hat at any time. It doesn't have to be right now. So maybe you're feeling like you're not so motivated, but once you have a few drinks, once you hear a few stories, maybe you'll feel more inspired. And so you can put your name here at any time. I also wanted to explain how we work in terms of time-wise. Because the stories are 5 to 7 minutes, we want to make sure that we have time to pull 10 names out of the hat every night. So we have the lovely Beth Ford over here, who is our timekeeper. And so this is what's going to happen after 5 minutes. So this is just kind of a heads up to you. You have 2 more minutes to tell your story. If you run into the full 7 minutes, you will hear this, the double maracas. So that will let you know just finish up as quickly as possible so we can have equity of voice here and so more people can tell stories. And over here, this young woman, Hari, is filming. She is a videographer for Citizens. And do you want to tell them, Hari, how this works?
So I will ask you to sign a release form if you're willing to share your story with us on CCTV, Citizens Channel 20. And I have my form on the clipboard, so I'll catch you before or after your story. And this mic that's on Crystal, I'll just clip it on you real quick, and then you'll be good to go. You don't have to give me your permission to use your story. You can say no, but it's really fun to share it with our viewers if you're willing, so thank you.
Not only is Hari being here, but she takes the time, she actually edits the program. Citizens airs it on local TV, so it's seen in places like Newcastle, Fort Chiswell, and Floyd. And then Hari and Citizens, they give that material to us on YouTube, and so Blue Ridge Story Space has its own YouTube channel. So if you would like your friends to see you tell a story, but they weren't able to be here tonight, then all you have to do is look for the YouTube channel. There's a link to it on our Facebook group, and you can just send them the link, and there you go. All right, everybody ready to get started? Our first name for It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. Peter, would you like to draw?
Jane.
Jane Trivet.
So this is my story. This is a true story. So please don't be offended. I don't mean to offend anyone. Well, it was a dark and stormy night. It was 1991. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, working on a master's in applied mathematics. I was going to 2 churches at the time. One was a Bible church. The other was a full gospel, Pentecostal, Word of Faith kind of church. I was also involved in Exodus International. That's an ex-gay ministry, and I was working very hard to change my sexual orientation. I had a roommate. Her name was Leanne. This story is about that dark and stormy night. The thunder cracked hard in the night, and through my bedroom window, I could see the trees bend and sway with the weight of the wind. The lightning illuminated the night sky, and I was just about asleep when suddenly Leanne burst into my room. She was in tears and crying, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I saw something." And I said, "What did you see?" And she said, it was It was dark. It was greenish. It was otherworldly. It was evil. It was a demon. And I'm like, really? What did it look like? And she said, you know, it was dark. It was hard to tell. It was dark green, black, and it had these red, tiny, beady eyes. And you know, I grew up Southern Baptist, and we believed in the Bible, but modern day demons was just not something I was used to. But this new church I was going to, you know, that Pentecostal one, they believed in things like this. So I thought, well, I'm going to tell them about it. You know, so I went to my pastors. It was a husband and wife team, and I told them what happened. And they said, well, Jane, you know about Mark, don't you? And I said, yeah, I know about Mark. Mark was a friend of mine, and he had told me his story, but I didn't quite believe it. I wasn't quite there yet. But here they were, my pastors corroborating his story. And essentially what happened to Mark was they went to his apartment and they performed an exorcism. And Mark was gay like me. And so during the course of that exorcism, this big black amorphous ball comes rolling out of Mark's closet, and it rolls down the hall, and it rolls through the living room, out the apartment door, and they kind of chase it, and they watch it, they open the door, and they watch it roll down the hallway of the apartment building and out the apartment building into the ethers. And I was like, okay. And they said, you know, they said, Jane, what she saw, what Leanne saw, was the spirit of homosexuality, and it has attached itself to you, and we can make you free. And at this point, I was desperate. I was willing to do anything. I'd been working at this point for close to 10 years on changing my orientation. So I'm like, I was willing to give anything a go, so I said, okay. And so we had to choose, you know, schedule a time, and we scheduled a time a couple of weeks out. It was September the 13th, 1991. It was a Friday the 13th, and we chose that day because they said evil spirits were more active on Friday the 13th, and we'd have the most success in exercising or, you know, performing an exorcism, getting the evil out, essentially. So that Friday night came, and they came to my door, and it was another dark and stormy night. And the winds were howling outside, and as they whipped within the leaves of the trees, they had this music all their own. My pastors came in, and they told me to sit down on the couch, and so I sat down, and they laid hands on me, and they started praying in tongues. And they would raise their hands to the heavens and then lower them, and raise their voices and lower their voices, what seemed to be with the rhythm of the winds outside. And they did this for about 20 minutes. And so then they asked me to get up off the couch and to stand in the center of the room. And so I went and I stood in the center of the room, and they threw some holy water on me. And this was water that the whole church had prayed over, and they started dancing around me. And this time they were speaking in English. They prayed in English. And they started praying. They commanded the spirit of homosexuality to leave. And they danced around me, and they were sprinkling holy water on me. And they did this. This went on for about another 20 minutes until the holy water was empty. And so when that was done, they asked me to go sit back down on the couch and to lay down. And they placed their hands on my forehead one last time, and they said, "Come out." And and so I laid there a few minutes, taking it all in. And then I sat up. But there was no black ball for me that night. You know, nothing came out of my closet except me. And I looked at them. I said, I don't feel any different. And they said, well, that's okay. You know, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks for these things to take. And so 26 years later, and I'm no longer waiting. Thank you.
So, it was a dark and stormy night. Although actually last night was pretty mild. It was warm and in the lower 60s, at least down in Roanoke, but tonight is likely to be a dark and stormy night. And my 61-year-old friend Red, mother of 3, 7th generation Bent Mountain landowner, is sleeping in a tree tonight to keep the Mountain Valley Pipeline criminals from cutting it down. And I say criminals because they were legally required to stop cutting trees on March 31st. And here's why. A judge back in January awarded them immediate possession of land where the landowners had refused to sign easements for the pipeline because of that March 31st deadline, which is there to protect the Indiana bat, which is a rare endangered species, as well as nesting birds, as well as endangered species fish in the case of Bottom Creek, a lot of different things, but they made their case based on that March 31st deadline. And what is it today? April 7th. They are still cutting down trees, and every tree they cut is against the law. And yet, this amazing 61-year-old woman, known on Bent Mountain as Mama Red, is sleeping in a tree because, as she says, and these are her words written on my hand 2 nights ago, what do you want on your banner, Red? This land is my heart. I have 3 children, and this mountain is like my 4th child. She is not letting them cut down her trees. She is not letting them cross Bottom Creek. She is not letting them build this 42-inch fracked gas, high-pressure transport pipeline, which is intended for export. Not going to benefit us, going to benefit the company that is proposing it. So my story tonight is about Red. It's about people who have been camped on the top of Peters Mountain, which is right on the border of Virginia and West Virginia, Giles County and Monroe County, through snowstorms like this, a foot of snow, 2 weeks ago, and like having to hike up and down steep mountains on public land. And they're still up there, even though a West Virginia judge said those tree sitters are more accurately representing the public interest than the corporations. Because that's how they're trying to do this, through eminent domain, which is a law in place to work for what is intended to be the public good. And it was actually ruled in a court of law. This is not. So my request for Floyd tonight, we are not new to this. We are veterans of the resistance. We have successfully fought pipelines 3 months, only 3 months with the MVP, but back, who here lived in Floyd 15 years ago? 2003. Yep. So you guys remember Dominion? You remember the Greenbrier? Yeah, we took them down too. So we know what we're doing. And I have worked with a lot of people, including people in this room, over the last 3.5 years, but we have exhausted legitimate means. We have appealed to the Department of Environmental Quality. We have multiple cases in the courts being decided. We have appealed to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We have gone to meeting after meeting. We have proved this. And nobody is protecting the landowners. It is time to take direct action, and it is being taken. And it is not just being taken by radical people on monopods on Pocahontas Road up in Giles County and in West Virginia. but by 61-year-old mothers and grandmothers who are sleeping in trees and depending on us on the ground to feed her and keep her warm and as safe and as comfortable as we can, with private security running through the woods, with companies that are being allowed to get away with criminal activity. My request to you, if you can help, please do. There are 3 clipboards here: on the ground support, media and outreach support, if you're willing to help. If not, if you can't, for whatever reason, I get it. There are 2 signs here. And let me see if I can get the one. Yeah, so here's a sample. I've got markers on here, just like, send her a message that says, "We love you, Red, solidarity, Floyd." So if you can help, and you want us to reach out to you for help, specific help, please sign up. If not, if you'd write a little story for Red so that I can take this to her tomorrow. If you are interested in actively helping on the ground defending Bent Mountain, we have a direct action training tomorrow from noon to 7 at the Bent Mountain Center. And when I say direct action, I'm not talking civil disobedience. There are a lot of ways to take direct action. You can write a letter to the editor. You can bring a pot of soup. You can talk to your neighbors. Taking direct action just means doing something. And that's what we're going to be exploring tomorrow. It's also a place that if you have camping gear, flashlights, especially warm things, sleeping bags, stuff like that, you can drop them at the Bent Mountain Center anytime between 12 and 7. And as of the end of the day tomorrow, we'll have a regular, permanent drop-off point. So I'm going to pass these around before the maracas get shaken again. And I want to thank you all for continuing to help and continuing to, will you hand these over here? Just give them to her. And I hope that everybody here has a warm place to be on this dark and stormy night. Thank you.
Well, it seems very appropriate that I follow Mara because she's the one that taught me all I know about writing. So I'm much better at writing than I am necessarily in talking about what I wrote. So, give me lots of support and I'll try to tell this story. It also happened on more than one dark and stormy night. This is about my husband's and my trip on a sailboat on our way to the Virgin Islands. We had foolishly bought a boat in Florida, 33-foot. It's called a cat-catch rig, which is supposed to be very easy to sail, but it's rigged differently for anybody that knows anything about sailing, which I really didn't. And we had a really lovely time wandering around, going to the Bahamas, spending 3 months just slumming around. And then we made this decision when we got back to the Chesapeake Bay that we were going to join a 50-boat rally that was heading for the Virgin Islands. This means 14 days on the open ocean. I had never been more than one overnight on a sailboat. So this was an adventure for sure. The day of the rally, we had gone to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and we were going to take off to much fanfare. It was like right around Halloween, and there was a lot of wind that day, so it was a perfect day for sailboats to take their course off, and there was a helicopter flying overhead, and they were giving us all this support, and we thought, oh, this is really going to be a wonderful trip. Well, on the first evening, we lost part of our supply of apples and potatoes that we had up in one of these little nettings, and it fell to the floor. Well, minor inconvenience to have rolling apples and potatoes on the floor. It's not a very big boat. And then we lost the snack food, and that fell. And then the toilet broke. this may be a minor inconvenience, but believe me, it becomes a major one the longer you're on the water. And so when I laid down to sleep that night, I said, I don't know, I have kind of a bad feeling about this night. So I'm rolling on the lee cloth, and I hear this crack, this loud crack. And I thought, oh dear, what's happened now? And Lester came running downstairs and looked like he was looking after something. And I said, what happened? And he said, oh, nothing. You have to know him a little bit. He's very nonchalant. Well, they didn't even know. It was so dark, they didn't even see that the whole mast, the middle mast, had cracked above the deck, fortunately, and fallen into the water. They had to cut the lines because there was nothing else to do. It was too heavy. So we thought, well, you know, let's see what we can do. We figured we had to turn back because we were like maybe a few hundred miles offshore. And so we called the weatherman, and he said, yeah, you should really go to Bermuda because you can get the boat fixed there. And I said, well, we really can't afford to go to Bermuda and spend whatever days it would take to fix the mast. So, and we'd also lost the windshield, which there's a different name for. You know, in sailing, everything has a special name. So we turned around, headed back, and Lester rigged up something on the middle mast to give us a little bit of leverage. And we're sitting there that evening, and we're saying, well, what are we going to do about this boat? And then the front mast starts rotating. Well, it could rotate and fall off below the deck, which would mean get in the life raft, or it could fall over on top, which fortunately it did. And so no sooner than I brought it up and asked Lester what to do, he said, oh, let's just see what happens. And we did. Within 10 minutes, the mast cracked off and fell in the water. So again, we have now 2 masts at the bottom of the ocean. And so we were dead in the water. And we had to call for help right then. I didn't even ask that time. I just said, Mayday, Mayday. And we got a response from a Saudi Arabian container ship, the Saudi Tabuk. He brought us 6 gallons of fuel and said he would call the Coast Guard. So there we were. It would take him probably a few hours to get to us. So we're just rocking and rocking. They managed to come right up to us. We put, you know, things all around the outside of the boat, but we're rocking into this huge Empire State Building in comparison to the Yugo that we were. So they brought us fuel. We headed back. And it was the most beautiful part of that journey, that we were making 1 mile an hour. And the next day, during the day, it was sunny, it was beautiful. The waves were cresting so high. It was like just rocking in a rocking chair back and forth. It was really lovely. And I said, oh, that's why people get sailboats and sail. I had never had an experience quite like that before. We managed, you know, everything was just difficult from then on because, you know, it's so slow and so long. But we finally made it to North Carolina. We slipped into a space and said, oh, I've never been so glad to be on land again. And I have had other experiences on dark and stormy nights, but that one takes the cake. Amen.
A long time ago, it seems like now, my husband and I decided to become real adults and buy a house. So we were living in San Francisco, where buying a house is a little bit different than buying one here, I'd say. So by this I mean we could only afford a fixer-upper, and it was a true fixer-upper that we bought. And that began a 5-year challenge. So to start out, you have to understand that if you're fixing in San Francisco, there's a good chance you have to involve the city and you have to get permits. And they're serious about this. The people who are in charge, the city people, will sit at the top of hills and look at you with their spy glasses, with their binoculars, looking for people who might be trying to get away with things. They drive up and down streets looking for stray toilets that might be sitting out on the edge of the street. So they're determined to get their money out of you if they can. So we needed a new roof. This was year 2 into the process, and we needed a new roof like right away. So we knew we needed an architect, and we knew we needed an engineer, so we got everything squared away. We got the architect, a friend did the engineering in exchange for babysitting. So we were doing pretty good. And then we submitted our plans to the city, and it took a long time. And in San Francisco, if you don't know the weather patterns, it's a summer dry, winter wet. And so we thought, starting in April, that we were pretty good. But we were pushed and pushed and pushed, and it wasn't really comfortable. We were coming up on the end, but we thought we had it. We thought we were still okay. So this is where the dark and stormy night part comes in. So we thought we were good. The work began. The roof was off. The whole, it's serious when you have to put up a beam that is so big that it's how big was it? It was big. And that's why we needed the engineer, because it had to go all the way to the ground, and it was up on the top floor. So there was a lot to this, and at this point we're without any roof at all. No roof, no roof. And the contractor is just doing a bang-up job, though. He swept everything up every night. He was just so good about everything. And then the weather was maybe going to do something unusual, like rain. Well, California is known for not having enough rain, but when it does, it can pour, and it can pour buckets and buckets in short amount of time, and the wind can be wild. And so that was our dark and stormy night. I have to say one thing about Peter, my husband. He can sleep through anything. He can sleep through anything. So everything from the top floor was down on the first floor, including our bed, which was a box spring and 2 mattresses on top of a frame. And so I almost needed a ladder to get in and out of my bed. And there we were in this, what we called the cave room, because there was no real window out to anything other than the light well. But it's raining and it's storming, and Peter is asleep, and I'm thinking, gosh, how can you sleep through this? This is kind of scary, isn't it? And then I hear the tarps up on top that are whipping around in the wind. And then I hear a very strange sound. It sounds like water, but it sounds really, really, really close. And I think, uh-oh. So I go out to the kitchen, and there are sheets of water running down the inside of our kitchen. Sheets and sheets of water. And I'm thinking, oh, and he's sleeping. What is this? How can he sleep? So I'm quick to jump and say, get up, get up, get up. It's time, get out of bed. We got problems. And so he was the right person to call at the time. He did fix the tarp up above, and it was not a good night. It was not a good night. But in the morning, there in the bucket outside our front door was a big bouquet of daisies with a sign, and the sign said, "It can only get better from here." Signed by our neighbors from across the street, Bob and Marie. And I have to say, it did get better. It did take 5 years to make it worth our while. We kept saying, why didn't we continue to rent? Why did we do this? But in the end, we sold our house in San Francisco, which allowed us to retire, and it paid for our sweat equity, which is unusual. So that's it.
This is Rowan.
All right.
Rowan, you might be, I'm pretty sure you're a greatest storyteller ever.
One night, its prediction was to have like about 4 inches of snow, but it was a dark and stormy night, and it became 1 foot of snow. My mom's car was halfway buried in snow. My dad had to go to work. He had a truck, and he left his Prius at work so he could get out of the driveway pretty well. And we had to go somewhere, so we got out because my dad really helped us by getting all of the snow out of the way. He did. And it was pretty fun. We could play hide and seek in the snow. It was pretty fun. You could even make tunnels in the grass. It was awesome for playing hide and seek. And the next day, it was like halfway melted. It's a fast melter, though. And it was like, it was not exactly an inch, 1 foot. It was like an inch less than a foot.
11 inches.
Yes. So it was pretty good until it snowed again and we weren't ready.
Tell them about what snow to avoid. Snow and why.
And also, there's lots of yellow snow. Because I had yellow dye.
What can you do with the snow if it's white? What can you put on it to make it tasty?
We also made snow pudding. And also, there's lots of black chicken poop in the snow. We have chickens.
Anything else you want to say, or are you done? What do you think?
I'm gonna do another story. One time it was a dark and stormy night. There was a lightning bolt hit our house, and all over internet was bam, destroyed. We had to be helped for like a month. It was a long time, but we finally got it back. Finished.
Thank you, Rowan, so much.
What does this say?
Good job. Oh, okay. It says Beth Ford.
Want to say this?
Beth Ford.
Well, it sure was dark at 2 in the morning the night Jimmy Gatus decided to drive down our driveway from the top of the ridge down to the river, where our farmhouse sat there all by itself, and he planned on killing my husband. So the night got stormy really quickly. Now when Jimmy came down, we were sound asleep, and we hear this horn honking, And it's a 1-mile driveway, as I said, gravel, just coming around, totally in the woods, isolated. And it came out. The only thing we usually heard were the foxhounds. Sometimes they'd run them at night up on the ridge. But this time it was a car horn just honking away. So my husband, he gets up, he says, oh, let me go see what it's about. And Jimmy pulls up in front of the farmhouse. Now you have to imagine this house. This was 1981. The house had been built at the turn of the century by a very rich lumber baron. Beautiful white old house with 2 doors, little porch, huge house. In 1981, we were paying $50 a month rent, and we had the outhouse I told you about last month, octagonal, you know, because the hole was blown up so big. But anyway, back to this night. So John Ford goes walking outside, and I'm sort of looking out the upstairs window. It's the fall, the window's open, and Jimmy pulls out a shotgun. He says, I'm going to kill you. And I'm this pregnant, all right? And I'm looking out, and Jimmy Gates is going to kill my husband. And I'm like, this can't happen. No. And I'm like, I started hollering. I said, Jimmy, what's up? And he said, you all stole my stuff. And we're like, what are you talking about? And he said, you stole my stuff. Well, what we had done was move his girlfriend out that day, her stuff out of his house to her new house. But as far as we knew, we had only moved her stuff. But how do you explain that to a drunken, back to the lander, which is what we all were, and we all loved each other. As a matter of fact, I wondered if before I'd been married to John Ford, I'd had dinner with Jimmy Gates before, and he'd fixed me a really nice bear, wild mushroom, you know, everything quite nice. But that had been a couple years before. But it did make you wonder just a little bit. But anyway, I leaned out and I thought, well, I'm going to use just a little bit of that memory. I'm like, oh, Jimmy, we didn't steal your stuff. Please, come on, you know, we were just moving Brenda out. You're upset. Let's talk about this. And he's looking up, and he said, Beth, you're mighty pregnant. And I said, I am mighty pregnant. You can't kill my husband. It just doesn't work. So, eventually, we got him talked down, offered him coffee. He said, no, I'm just going to drive home. Sorry to have bothered you. So he puts his shotgun away. And it was probably, I don't know, 6 months, a year later, I run into him over at the local college at a Celtic festival. I mean, this is a lot like Floyd, right? Except it's up in West Virginia. And I'm like, Jimmy Gates, did I dream that you came to my house with a shotgun? He's like, I'm so sorry, Beth. So sorry. Didn't mean to rile you. Okay, Jimmy. All's forgiven. Hugs are given. Well, but it wasn't forgotten. And about 15 years later, I get a call. At this point, I live in Florida. And I get a call from a mutual friend of Jimmy Gates and mine, by the name of Maurice. And Maurice says, hey, Beth, will you help me play a practical joke on Jimmy Gates? I'm like, you called the right person. He didn't know about this. I said, sure. And he said, Jimmy's living up in Alaska now, and he's got a young girlfriend that he's left. And I want you to write a letter telling him you're pregnant and you're this girl, And I'm like, oh, Jimmy, now this is not something I normally would do. I mean, come on. That's just a little out there. But I said, sure, okay. So I wrote one steamy letter, oh, I miss you, Jimmy Gatus, and you just, please, you got to come back. You got to come back in my life, and I'm going to have your baby. And I mailed it to Maurice. I said, now, I won't go that far. I'll send it to you. You will be the one breaking the law or whatever it is. And he mailed that letter to Jimmy Gatus. And Jimmy Gatus ended up going back to that little village and talking to this woman who said, I don't want you anywhere near me. I'd never have your baby. And to this day, he has no idea. There you go. Thank you.
It was a dark and stormy night when I pulled up in my grandmother's driveway. At the time, I was living with her, and I'd been out on a date. And when we always knew when we were young and we were out dating, if it started raining, we had to come home because there was 3 ways into my grandmother's house, 3 roads. And all 3 roads had a low bridge. And they would flood, and the vehicles couldn't get across them because the distributor would get wet and you would be stuck there. And I knew better than to call my grandmother and say I wasn't coming home that night. Because even though my grandmother struggled her entire life to get above 100 pounds, which I obviously didn't struggle with, I knew not to cross her. She had 14 other children, most of them bigger than me, and she handled them just fine, so I had no doubts but what she could handle me. I wasn't going to go down that road. So I pulled in that night. I'd gotten out of the car, and the boy I dated, he left to hurry up and get back across the bridge before he couldn't, because that wasn't going to work with Grandma either, that he was going to have to stay. But when you also, on a stormy night at Grandma's house, you also knew you didn't get out of the vehicle and walk straight into the house. My grandmother had this big monster house. Her husband, my grandfather, was a brick mason and a carpenter, and he had built this house for her and her 14 children. She had this great big old living room. It was roughly 30 feet long by about 15 foot wide, and it had this black slate rock floor all over it. Well, when it was an electrical storm like we were having that night, you could sit and watch the lightning come in, and it would hit that floor, and like a little ball, it would roll across that floor. So we had this rule at the house when on a stormy night, we had to sit out on the porch till that first ball went through. And then we would time it until the next one went through. And we knew how much time we had to get through the door and down the hall into our bedroom. So I went up and I'm sitting on the porch waiting on that first ball of lightning. Well, I hear my dog Shotzi down in the other end, down near my bedroom, and she is just barking. I mean, she is going crazy. And she wasn't scared of thunder and lightning, and I couldn't understand. And I'm thinking about my little teeny grandma trying to keep this big border collie under control, you know. And I could hear Grandma hollering, Shotzi, calm down, calm down, calm down. She wouldn't calm down. But I couldn't go in and do anything about it because I had to wait on a ball of lightning going across the floor. So I sat down on the chair and I waited just a couple minutes. It wasn't long at all, and sure enough, here comes the first ball. And it goes through the floor, and I watch it go across, you know. So I wait, and I'm watching my watch to see how long it takes the next one. And it was only about a minute and a half, and here goes the next ball of lightning. And I said, okay, I've got a minute and a half. You got to go across that floor. And I was down in the left wing of the house, all the way at the end of the hall across from my grandmother. That was where my bedroom was. So I opened the door and I made a dash, and I made it to my wing. Well, I get down, headed to my bedroom and going to get my dog, and I opened the door. I said, come on, Shotzi. And Grandma said, no, just hang on a minute. And I said, oh, Lord. I'm thinking, what's going on? And Grandma said, I want you to get Shotzi, and I want you to go back into the kitchen. And she said, get to the back door. And she says, when it's time for the next ball of lightning, once you get there, you let that dog out. I said, oh, Lord, well, so I have to get back to the living room, and I have to time it, this time with me and a dog, getting us across that floor again. So I hold Shotzi right at the edge of the left wing in that living room, and I watch that ball of lightning go through. I'm thinking, okay, I got a minute and a half, so I get Shotzi and we run to the dining room into the kitchen. We get to the back door, and so I had to wait on another crack of lightning because Grandma said, wait till it's time for the next ball of lightning and then let the dog go. I said, okay. So I waited on the next one to come through, and then I looked at my watch and I timed it and I opened the back door, and I mean, Shotzi, she was just going nuts, clawing at that door trying to get out, you know. So it was time. I opened the door. Well, about the time I opened the door and I turned Shotzi loose, I heard the ball of lightning crack, but at the same time I heard my grandmother's shotgun go off. And I said, Lord have mercy. And so Shotzi's running across the field. I hear this man squalling. I mean, he's a hollered as he hit the fence. We had a fence going around. We had a cabbage field next to our house. And you heard him hit the fence, and Shotzi's right on his tail about the time that, you know, the shotgun blast goes off. And he goes over the fence and down through the cabbage. Well, it was rainy and muddy, and it was rotten cabbage and everything else, and you're hearing him slipping and sliding. So he goes on, and I come back in and get Shotzi back, and we come back in, and Grandma said, well, I don't guess he'll be back. And I said, no, I don't. And I know they knew it was this little old 90-pound lady in there, and he was going to go in and get into mischief, you know. He underestimated her. And so the next morning we go out, and there on the fence post, or beside the fence post on the barbed wire, was a piece of his breeches where he had jumped the fence. Part of his pocket and part of the edge in there. And Grandma just grinned, and she said, give me that piece of fabric. I said, all right. So I reached up and got it to her and handed it to her, and she come back in the house, and she worked from home for one of the Parkway sewing factories out there in Laurel Fork, and they let her have a sewing machine at home. And she sat there and she took that piece of scrap and she sewed it into this little stuffed doggy toy thing. And she put it in Shotzi's bed, and every time it would storm, Shotzi would go get that little stuffed thing that Grandma had made for her, and she'd take it to the back door. She didn't even wait on Grandma or me to let her out the back door. She'd just go sit by the back door with her little chew toy, and Grandma'd just sit there quilting and just grinning from ear to ear, waiting on the storm to pass.
All right, so I'm a big introvert, so if I can do this, the rest of you people can do this, okay? We're sheep farmers. We own Icelandic sheep, which are basically a fleece breed of sheep, long hair, small animals. And as any of you are livestock farmers, you know that everything and every one of your animals gives birth on a dark and stormy night. Such is the case here, right? Because for us, it's always in spring, unless the farmer kind of screws that up. Lets the ram back in a little early, then you start having babies in August, July, September. And since we're a little new at this, that happened to us this last year. So we thought we were not going to have babies. And then all of a sudden, come July, everybody's looking a little too big. And we had a good friend over who also has sheep, and we're like, do you think, we're pregnant here? Oh, yeah. We're like, well, how many? We had 9 ewes at the time. All of them, I think. And we're like, great. We're also vegetable farmers, so we're in the middle of peak vegetable production. So the babies start coming, and Icelandic sheep are very independent and very self-reliant. So most of the time, you're pretty lucky with them, and they're pretty easy. And we come out, and there's cute little babies, and you're like, yay! And then they're girls, and you're like, yay! And so it was all going along very fine. And so I was there one morning by myself, and one of our ewes, who had never had babies before, it looked like she was in labor. It was about 10 in the morning, and it was not a dark and stormy morning. It was actually quite a beautiful morning in August. And sure enough, she's having babies. So I've got my phone, and I'm texting my partner who's at work. And I'm like, oh my God, look, we're having babies. here's the first one, and they're, it's like, oh, it's so great. And I was like, wait a minute, I think there's more. So here comes another one. Well, Icelandic sheep, the babies are usually 3 to 9 pounds when they're born. 6 to 9 is pretty typical. The first one was probably about 3, and then all of a sudden I'm like, there's more. So she has another one, plops it out, and it's just sort of laying there. And I'm like, come on, you got to clean this one up too. And it was about 1.5 pounds, tiny. And I was like, well, this is probably not very good, but let's just see what we can do here. So the mother's really good, and she's cleaning her off, and she's getting up as 2 girls. And so I was helping her, and we're all good. And the more you can get the mother to bond, the better it is. You don't really want to take the baby away. So my partner gets home, and we go in, and we're looking at her, and she's having a lot of trouble nursing. She's so tiny, literally tiny, this big. She can't get to the nipple to nurse. So we're like, okay, well, we'll bottle feed her. We had colostrum from one of our milk from another mother. And we'll try to get her, but we'll leave her with her mom and see if she can sort of work into this. So we start feeding her, and everything seems to be okay, and they're bonding with her sister, and we go back to the house. And then the dark and stormy night happens. So all of a sudden, this huge, because it's summertime, and dark and stormy nights do happen in the summertime very quickly, a huge thunderstorm came up. And we were like, okay, well, let's just wait for the thunderstorm to roll through, because we didn't want to walk up to the barn and die. And some of these other stories were horrific, so I can imagine. So we walked back up to the barn after this thunderstorm, and they're in their own little pen by themselves, the mother and the two ewe lambs. And we go in, and the one ewe is not, the one lamb is not there. The 1.5 pound one is not in there. She's not in there at all. We're like, well, maybe she's under the hay, or she's so small, or nowhere. Can't find her. So we're looking around, we're kind of freaking out. We're like, well, where could she be? Like, what would have happened? And we're looking, and we're kind of starting to panic, and all of a sudden I hear this like creaky, like hinge sound. It's like, and I'm looking, the gates are all closed, we can't figure it out. And so I went out, there's an outdoor pen connected to the barn. And so I went out in there, and there's a little rock, and on this little rock is this little tiny lamb laying there going, I was like, oh my gosh. So I picked her up, and we're like, this is not good. She's got pneumonia, we pick her up, and we put her in with her mom, and we give her another bottle. Everything, she calms down, she's breathing, she's making a lot of noise, she's kind of mouthy, and we're feeling okay. So we decided, instead of bringing her in and have a bottle baby, it's really a lot better if you can make them bond with the mother. So we're like, okay, we'll just get up every 3 hours and go feed her and keep her with her mother, because her mother hadn't rejected her. Harder on the farmer, but better for the lamb. So I get up at midnight to go feed her again. And I walked into the stall, and she's not there again. And I go, oh my God, where is she? And I looked where she was before, and I looked all over the barn, and my partner gets up at 3:30 in the morning, and I'm like, I really can't call. But finally I was like, I can't find her. She's like, okay, I'll come up to the barn and help you look for her. So I looked, and it's the stall's over here, and she was over the very front of the barn. And I scooped her up again. And so clearly this little guy has a lot of energy to like walk through the little holes in the gates and gets out, and she's very tenacious and very mouthy. And I put her back in, and so we fed her for the next 2 months, kept her with her mother. She currently is the most beautiful little mouthy, tenacious animal that we have on the farm. And so sometimes dark and stormy nights don't mean negative things, they mean really great things. So thanks.
So if y'all haven't had those shrimp and grits here, you need to. Every time I come, I say I'm not going to get it again, and I get it again. So anyway, you really, really need to get it. It was a dark and stormy night, and then the next day, that's how I'm going to start that one. It was a steamy July in Floyd, and We don't have very many mosquitoes here, which is a good thing, and a lot of people actually have said that, oh, when I tell them where I live, oh, that's so awesome, you don't have mosquitoes. But we do have a very, 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 very evil bug here for me. I've heard it called many, many names. We'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so the next day after a dark and stormy night, I live out in Willis, surrounded by woods. My kids are very young. We go for a walk. We live, down the street, down the road, rocky, dirty road. And there's a stream, and so it's humid, and it's misty, and it's hot, and I come home, and I'm like, gosh, I'm kind of itchy right here. And so I go home, and I wash my face, and it's still itching me and driving me crazy. And if you were here last month, things happen to me, and I tend to progress it to worse. So I was like, I'm not doing that this time. I'm not going to do that. It's just I have an itchy head. That's all it is. And so I sit down. Later that evening, I'm on my laptop, and was talking to my sister, I believe, on the phone, and I'm like, I can see my forehead. I'm looking down at my laptop, and I can kind of see my forehead. I think I must be having some kind of reaction to this, maybe it was a bug bite. So let that go, and my husband's sitting on the couch beside me, and we live in a very tiny little space, and he's like, what the blimp is wrong with your forehead? And I was like, I don't know, I just was thinking, I feel like it's kind of starting to stick out a little bit. And so he's like, so I'm like, I feel like maybe you need to, we don't have any Benadryl or anything, I feel like maybe you need to go to the Village Mart, which is down our windy, dirty road, about 10 minutes away. I feel like, I think you need to go get some Benadryl. This is obviously growing. I'm having some kind of reaction. So while he's gone, I put a warm compress on it, thinking that would help. And when I put the warm compress on it, it literally starts burning, my face is burning off, like Poltergeist where the guy's face falls. So he comes home, and I have the warm compress, and he walks in, he's like, I got your Benadryl, how's it doing? And I was like, I kind of feel like it's getting worse. And so here's our family room, here's a little kitchen. He walks in, and he's like, I'm like, I feel like it's getting worse. And he went, oh, sweet Jesus! Oh my God, get in the car right now. And I'm like, what's the matter? And he goes, you look like what was it called? Klingon that's been beaten with a baseball bat. I was like, what? And so I get up and look in the mirror, and I'm like, oh, sweet Jesus, I do. Oh my God. And I was like, I feel like the warm compress may have made it worse. He's like, whatever, get in the car. And if you were here last month, our neighbor, our trusty little neighbor, we have a path through the wood. He's often on call for me. So we send our little kids over through the trail to our neighbor's house. Guess what? You're on call again. We got to go. So living in Floyd County is one of the perks is you can call your doctor and be like, hey, especially when it's me, funny thing, I think I got stung by something. And she's gracious enough to say, okay, meet me at the office, because it's me. And so she meets me there, and at this point I'm taking pictures just in the 20-minute drive from where I live in Willis to Floyd, and my face is seriously changing as we are driving. My eyebrow is now over my eye and cannot see, but by the time we get to the doctor, I cannot see out of one eye, and my husband's just like, I don't even know. So we go in, she gives me an EpiPen shot. She's like, I don't think that's really going to do much. She gives me some other steroid shot, but then I have to lay there for a while to make sure, my heart everyth's okay. And I'm laying there, and she's asking my husband, do you want to come in and sit with her? He's like, yeah, no. I'm good. Just let me know if she gets normal again. And so I'm laying in there. Starts to go down. My heart rate's fine. So she sends me home. When I get home, I have sunglasses on. I walk over to my neighbors. Everything's still swollen. I walk over to my neighbors, and I go to get hey, your mom's, I'm back. And my kids came out and I took off my sunglasses, and my neighbor just went, holy cow. And I was like, I know. it's better than it was. So the night goes on, we go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and my little boy comes out of the bedroom that he shares with my daughter, and he walks out, and we have like this cabinet there, and he stands there, and he looks over, and he looks at his little sister, and he goes, "Is she normal?" And his little, probably like 3-year-old sister went, and he just goes, "Can you just wear the sunglasses?" And I was like, yeah. So I had to wear sunglasses all around. Well, also that morning I wake up and I'm laying in bed thinking, oh, it's not itchy anymore. Everything's fine. I'm laying there, and my husband, I wake to feel like a presence, and I open my eyes, and my husband's on the floor with his face right beside mine, and I was like, "Oh, good morning. Is it better?" And he went, So all the poison or whatever from this bug had settled under my eyes. And literally when I walked, it was like these jelly, gelatinous, sacks full of liquid, and I'm not even kidding. And I took a picture, and I looked like Droopy the dog from the Warner, those cartoons, and it was all sagging in my face with these big sacks of liquid. It was just a nightmare. And anyway, I had to wear sunglasses for several days. I had to travel back north to Pittsburgh to visit my family, and I walked in to visit my parents, and my sister was sitting there, and she went, I don't even, no one knew who I was. I was this big, puffy character from a cartoon, and there's not really a happy ending other than it did kind of go back to normal. Oh, and so people call it a buffalo fly, people call it a deer fly here. I don't really know what its real name is, but do not let it sting you in the face. It's not good.
Okay, I am just altering my words a little, and it's going to be, it was a dark and steamy night. Yeah. But don't get too excited. It's just me camping with my kids. Single mom, I got to do the adventurous stuff that's required to have a great childhood, right? Yeah. So I'll come back to the steamy night part, but I decided to go to Huntington, North Carolina. I don't know, I've camped so many places I can't remember where I was, but I packed the car up, got the tent, got all the goods, went and spent $47 on really expensive, wonderful snacks. This will happen a little later, make it real special, put it in a special little separate cooler from World Wildlife Fund, the little zipper ones that are kind of silver inside, and they're really cute. Anyway, so I was prepared. Got there and didn't tell my son, who I think he was 15 at the time, my daughter's 9, that we were doing primitive camping at the beach. No big deal. We just have to park and then carry all our stuff in. And meanwhile, past the sign that I didn't read very carefully, whatever, and took everything in and, made our tent site. And, well, wait a second. Went to get the tents out. And I was like, okay, you grab the poles, I got this. Arlo, that's my son's name. You get your own one-man tent that I used to take backpacking in college. It'll be great. You got your tent. Me and your sister Samaya will have the other tent. He's like, yes, I finally get my own tent. We're camping, but I'm in my tent. Y'all do your thing. And we're on Mom's little adventure again, whatever she thinks she's got planned for us. And we go to get the poles out, and we're like, oh, wait. Where are the poles for the 3 to 4 man tent? Oh, schnoggers, we forgot them. Or Mom, you forgot them, because it's always my fault, right? I was like, oh, God, all we have is the 1-man tent for a 15-year-old boy and a 40, 30, 9, 8-year-old woman, and your 9-year-old sister. We'll be fine. It's 4 days. We got this, right? So immediately Arlo starts saying, this is a joke, right? We're going to a hotel. I was like, no, this is your mom you're talking about. We've lived in a camper permanently before. This is fine. We got this. Set the tent up and go to the beach. And we're having a wonderful time, and I make my miraculous meal, which I don't remember what it was. I think bean burritos. And, about to go to bed, and well, wait, we had fun before that and had a fire. Anyway, so it was like it's starting to get hot. You know, I think it was June, you know, the end of June, and we're ready to go to bed, and I'm making sure that, like, you know, everybody's got their little flashlight, and we got our books, and we got our story time, and we got our coolers where they need to be, and my little fancy cooler. Everything's great. Okay, and we go in there, and we start reading, and we go to sleep, and it's getting kind of sweaty. You know, I got, like, Arlo's feet next to my face. Did I mention this is a one to two person tent? So it's probably like, yeah, you know, sister's in the middle, fall asleep. I'm like, what's that sound? I'm like, I'm used to the woods. You know, I got this, like the deer going, yeah, we know. I've heard that one before. Yeah. I've heard, like, people having sex in a tent near me. Sex. I've heard it all in the woods. Camping. But this was an unusual sound. This was like a dead body being dragged across the ground. And I was like, wait a minute, what's that sound? And then like some and like cat fight a little bit in the left and this, that. And I'm like, all right, it's got to be squirrels. Raccoons. Okay, probably raccoons. And I wake Arlo up and I'm like, where's the flashlight? Is it under you? You know, we're in the one-man tent. And I'm like, okay, there's something out there getting our stuff. I don't know what's happening. And he's like, well, I don't know. Like, why don't you go look? And then he's like, let's just sit here a minute. And we're laying there. And then I hear like what starts to kind of sound like a drunk couple, like fighting. It starts to almost sound like, I don't know, I grew up with tomcats. Then it starts to escalate into like the worst tomcat fight you've ever heard. Like hissing, scratching, the bags being ripped open, stuff being drug around. He's like, Mom, you cannot go outside. I don't know what could happen. Like, you could get hurt, and I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, his face, I don't know if any of you have teenage boys, or did, the snacks. And I'm like, oh, God, yes! He's like, the cashews, and the little, like, chocolate-covered raisins, and I'm thinking $48 of snacks. I was like, I don't care what is out there. I mean, I can deal with this, right? And I go to unzip the tent, and I get out with the flashlight, and all I see are, like, all these little yellow eyes, like turn to me, and I'm just like, oh, no way. And I get back in the tent, I zip up. And I mean, I don't even know what's left out there. So I'm laying there next to, you know, my son, who is like petrified and really disappointed about our snacks. And my daughter's sleeping, and she's so sweaty that her hair, like, it's like steamy night. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like she's totally sweat dripping off of her face and asleep, has no idea what's going on. And then it gets so bad that I thought it was like a, what do you call WWF wrestling? Like, I mean, I didn't know raccoons were capable of this. They were rolling and their bodies were slamming up against the tent. Like you could see their bodies like hitting the side of the tent, and you know, Arlo and I are like, we do not have raccoons like this in Floyd County. I don't know what's happening, like crazy. So we just had to weigh it out. And to make a long story short, we finally fell asleep, and every once in a while off in the distance you would hear the fighting, you know, further off. The next morning, who was saying the next morning earlier? Was it you? Oh, shoot. The next morning, where it was like you looked out, who was that? I forgot who it was. Anyway, so the next morning I unzipped the tent, and the dead body that sounded like it was being dragged across, in the pine needles, you could see just this, you know, path where my $48 snack bag had been dragged into the forest. You know, they had ripped it open. There was like raisinette boxes and cashew lids and all this stuff everywhere. And so my kids and I were like, oh, whatever, we'll be fine. And I'm thinking, no, we won't be fine because we don't have much food left. But we, you know, walked down to the beach and we started laughing, telling the story. We were picturing the raccoons with like their big stomachs, like barfing and throwing up and, you know, with like patches on their eyes from having a big, you know, fight. And anyway, so to end the story, the next morning, or 2 mornings later, whatever it was, we were packing up to leave, and I read the sign a little closer, and it had a picture of a raccoon, and it said, the raccoons here are not like any other raccoons that you have ever met. They can undo zippers and buckles and snaps and car doors and zippers on your tent, like you need to be very, very careful. So anyway, my kids still tell the story, so.
Okay, everybody, so it is 7 o'clock, and so we will officially conclude round 4 of Blue Ridge Story Space. And I have 2 announcements. The smaller announcement is that, of course, put on your calendars, May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. That is the next Blue Ridge Story Space. The theme is going to be That Pet of Mine. So now for the huge announcement. We have so enjoyed our time at Oddfellows. However, Blue Ridge Story Space has gotten too big. 2 of the 4 times that we've had the event here, and I think it would have happened tonight as well had there not been snow, we've had to turn people away at the door. And it's been so upsetting to have to turn people away. It's a great thing to have outgrown a space, and it's a bad thing because we love Oddfellows so much. However, we've made a decision to take it to another location because we don't want to ever turn anybody away. We want this to always stay a free place, a free space for people, and we want it to continue to grow. So we will be, I'm happy to say, starting next month at the Junebug Center in the Little Theater. We've applied for a special permit, so it is going to be, there will be beer and wine for sale there. We will likely have a food truck, and the best thing of all, I think, about this is that it's BYOB, so you can bring your own booze, you can bring your own food. So I know not everybody can afford or wants to spend the money coming out to a place to actually dine, and I think this will also open up the event and make it more equitable for people. So please put us on your calendars at the Junebug Center for May the 5th, same time, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Thank you all so much for coming.